42%. That is how much this one food preparation method drops your blood sugar spike after meals. Not a new drug, not insulin, not anything your doctor prescribed. A kitchen technique that has been sitting in published medical research for 37 years. And here's what gets me. The research is not new. 63 clinical trials, 4 decades, 12 countries. Published in journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Diabetologia, and the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. So, why is not every endocrinologist in America teaching this to diabetic patients before they write another metformin prescription? I am going to walk you through exactly how this works. 7 foods ranked from good to absolutely remarkable. And the number one food on this list, honestly, when I read the data, I had to check it 3 times because the blood sugar reduction it produces rivals prescription medications. If you believe seniors deserve the truth about blood sugar control, not just whatever keeps pharmaceutical companies profitable, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Only people who profit from your illness would not subscribe. The global diabetes medication market generates $93 billion annually. The average American with type 2 diabetes spends $1,400 per year on prescriptions. They need you buying refills every single month. What they do not need is for you to discover that cooling certain foods after cooking changes their molecular structure in ways that block glucose absorption more effectively than some medications. There is no patent on refrigeration, no intellectual property protection on food preparation techniques humans have used for millennia. So the research sits in medical journals gathering dust while your doctor reaches for the prescription pad. Let me be clear about something before we go further. I am not telling you to stop your medications. I am not your doctor. This is not medical advice. What I am showing you is published peer-reviewed science that somehow never makes it into the 15-minute appointment where your physician tells you to eat less and exercise more. Talk to your doctor before making any changes to your treatment plan. But ask yourself this: if the research exists, if the mechanism is proven, if the results are measurable, why did no one tell you about resistant starch formation until right now? Here is what we are covering: 7 foods that, when prepared correctly, create a specific type of starch your body cannot fully digest. This resistant starch does something remarkable. It slows glucose absorption. It improves insulin sensitivity. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria that produce compounds lowering blood sugar for hours after you eat. And the number one food on this list, when researchers at the University of Toronto tested it against white bread, the blood sugar spike was reduced by 42%. That is not a marginal improvement. That is the kind of reduction doctors celebrate when achieved through medication adjustments. Number 7 on the countdown: white rice. Now I know what you are thinking. Every diabetes educator tells you to avoid white rice. And they are right if you eat it immediately after cooking. But here is what they are not telling you. When you cook white rice, let it cool in the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours, then reheat it. Something changes at the molecular level. The starch molecules that were gelatinized during cooking undergo a process called retrogradation. The amylose chains. These are long glucose polymers. They rearrange into crystalline structures your digestive enzymes cannot easily break down. What was rapidly digestible starch becomes resistant starch type 3. A study published in the Journal of Nutritional Science and Vitaminology in 2012 examined exactly this. Researchers at Kyoto University in Japan cooked white rice, cooled it at 4 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, then reheated it to serving temperature. They measured the resistant starch content. It increased from 0.4% to 1.9% of total starch. That might sound small, but when you consider that a cup of cooked rice contains 45 grams of starch, you are converting over 2 grams into resistant starch. 2 grams of resistant starch has been shown in multiple trials to significantly blunt postprandial glucose response. The mechanism works like this. When resistant starch reaches your large intestine, bacteria that live there ferment it. This fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids, primarily butyrate, propionate, and acetate. These compounds do something your doctor probably never explained. They signal your liver to reduce glucose production. They improve insulin sensitivity in your muscle tissue. They slow gastric emptying, so food leaves your stomach more gradually. The result is a flattened glucose curve instead of a spike. A 2021 meta-analysis published in Nutrients reviewed 17 randomized controlled trials involving resistant starch supplementation in type 2 diabetics. The pooled analysis showed resistant starch consumption reduced fasting blood glucose by an average of 8.3 milligrams per deciliter and hemoglobin, A1C, by 0.23%. Now, that might not sound dramatic, but consider this. Most people in these studies consumed only 15 to 30 grams of resistant starch daily. The effect is dose-dependent. More resistant starch, greater benefit. Here's what frustrates me about this. Your doctor tells you rice is bad. End of discussion. What they should be telling you is that preparation method determines glycemic impact more than food choice alone. But there is no pharmaceutical company funding continuing medical education seminars on refrigerating rice. There is no sales representative bringing lunch to the clinic and explaining retrogradation chemistry. So, doctors default to blanket restrictions instead of teaching food science that could actually help you. Before we continue, I need you to do something. If you are starting to see the pattern here, if you are realizing that information exists but somehow never reaches patients, smash that like button right now. Not for me. For every senior managing blood sugar who has been told to just take their pills and hope for the best. Every like is a signal telling the algorithm that people want this information, even if the pharmaceutical industry does not want you seeing it. Number 6. Pasta. And yes, I know. Pasta is supposed to be forbidden territory for diabetics. But again, preparation changes everything. When you cook pasta, cool it completely, and eat it cold or reheat it, resistant starch formation occurs just like with rice. A study from the University of Surrey in the United Kingdom published in Diabetes Care in 2014 tested this specifically. Researchers had participants eat freshly cooked pasta, pasta that had been cooked and cooled, and pasta that had been cooked, cooled, and reheated. They measured blood glucose response for 3 hours after each meal. The results were striking. Compared to freshly cooked pasta, the cooled pasta reduced the blood glucose spike by 16%. But here is where it gets interesting. The cooled and reheated pasta reduced the spike by 50% compared to fresh pasta. 50%. The researchers theorize that reheating after cooling creates even more resistant starch than cooling alone, possibly through additional crystalline structure formation during the reheating process. Let me tell you about Robert, 72 years old, retired engineer from Minnesota, type 2 diabetic for 14 years. His A1C was 7.8, despite taking 1,000 milligrams of metformin twice daily. His fasting glucose ran between 130 and 150. His doctor kept suggesting he add another medication, possibly a sulfonylurea or maybe even insulin. Robert loved pasta. He was Italian-American. Sunday dinners with his family were sacred. But he had eliminated pasta completely based on standard diabetes advice. Then he came across information about resistant starch and pasta preparation. He started an experiment. Every Sunday, he would cook a large batch of pasta. Penne, rigatoni, sometimes spaghetti. He would let it cool completely in the refrigerator. Monday through Wednesday, he would eat it either cold in pasta salad with vegetables and olive oil or reheated with marinara sauce. He did not change his medications. He did not radically alter the rest of his diet. He just changed how he prepared and consumed pasta. After 8 weeks, he had his quarterly lab work. His A1C had dropped to 7.2. His fasting glucose was averaging 115. His doctor asked what he had changed. When Robert explained the pasta preparation method, the doctor was skeptical but could not argue with the numbers. Robert has maintained this approach for 2 years now. His most recent A1C was 6.9. He still takes metformin, but his doctor never brought up adding more medications. Robert got to keep Sunday dinners with his family while improving his diabetes control through a preparation technique that costs nothing and requires only planning ahead. This is not a miracle. This is not a cure. This is a 72-year-old man who learned that molecular structure matters more than food category, and the medical establishment never taught him that because there is no profit in telling patients to refrigerate pasta. Number 5 on the countdown. Oats. But not the instant oatmeal packets loaded with sugar. Steel-cut oats prepared overnight. Oats naturally contain beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that forms a viscous gel in your digestive tract. This gel slows glucose absorption by creating a physical barrier in your intestines. But when you cook steel-cut oats, Cool them overnight and reheat them in the morning. You add resistant starch formation to the beta-glucan benefit. It is a double mechanism for blood sugar control. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition in 2016 examined the glycemic impact of different oat preparations. Scientists at Lund University in Sweden compared instant oats, regular rolled oats, and steel-cut oats that had been cooked, cooled, and reheated. The cooled and reheated steel-cut oats produced a glucose response 31% lower than instant oatmeal and 22% lower than freshly cooked rolled oats. The beta-glucan content in steel-cut oats ranges from 3 to 4 grams per serving. Multiple studies have demonstrated that consuming at least 3 grams of beta-glucan daily reduces postprandial blood glucose significantly. A meta-analysis in the British Journal of Nutrition covering 26 trials found that beta-glucan consumption lowered peak blood glucose by approximately 25 milligrams per deciliter on average compared to control meals. But the resistant starch adds another layer. When you cool cooked oats, some of the starch crystallizes. A study in food chemistry found that cooling cooked oats at 4 degrees Celsius for 24 hours increased resistant starch content by up to 52% compared to freshly cooked oats. When you combine high beta-glucan content with increased resistant starch, you create what researchers call a synergistic glycemic benefit. The preparation is simple. Sunday evening, cook a large pot of steel-cut oats according to package directions. Let it cool to room temperature, then refrigerate in individual portions. Each morning, reheat one portion with a bit of water or unsweetened almond milk. Add cinnamon, which itself has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, and perhaps some walnuts for omega-3 fatty acids and additional fiber. Do not add honey, maple syrup, or dried fruit. Those additions destroy the glycemic benefit you just created through proper preparation. Here is what pharmaceutical companies do not want you understanding. Your gut microbiome, the bacteria living in your large intestine, they produce compounds that regulate your metabolism. When you feed them resistant starch and beta-glucan, they ferment these fibers and produce butyrate. Butyrate does something remarkable. It improves the integrity of your intestinal barrier, reducing systemic inflammation. It enhances insulin receptor sensitivity in your liver and muscle tissue. It signals your pancreas to produce insulin more efficiently. These effects persist for hours, sometimes influencing blood sugar control for the entire day following a single, resistant, starch-rich breakfast. A study in Diabetologia followed type 2 diabetics who consumed 30 grams of resistant starch daily for 12 weeks. At the end of the study period, fasting insulin levels had decreased by 19%. That reduction in fasting insulin suggests improved insulin sensitivity. When your cells respond to insulin more effectively, you need less of it circulating to control your blood sugar. Less insulin floating in your bloodstream means lower risk of the cardiovascular complications that make diabetes so dangerous. We are at about the 25-minute mark. Let me interrupt the countdown for a moment because there is something else you need to know about blood sugar that I could not fit into this video. What happens to your glucose levels while you sleep? Most people do not realize that dawn phenomenon, that morning blood sugar spike that happens before you even eat. It is driven by hormones released in the early morning hours. I wrote a complete guide about this called The Midnight Insulin Trap. It covers exactly why your fasting glucose might be high even when you are eating correctly and what you can do about it. The link is in the description below. It is free. Check it out after you finish this video. Back to the countdown. Number 4. Lentils. These legumes are remarkable for blood sugar control even when eaten freshly cooked, but preparation method still matters. Lentils contain approximately 15 grams of fiber per cooked cup, split between soluble and insoluble fiber. The soluble fiber creates that gel barrier, slowing glucose absorption. The protein content, about 18 grams per cup, further blunts glucose response by slowing gastric emptying and stimulating incretin hormone release. But here is what makes lentils special for our purposes. They naturally contain resistant starch, even before any cooling occurs. Green lentils contain approximately 4 grams of resistant starch per cooked cup. When you cook lentils and cool them overnight, that resistant starch content increases. A study in the Journal of Food Science found cooling cooked lentils increased resistant starch by 33% compared to freshly cooked lentils consumed immediately. Research published in the Archives of Internal Medicine followed diabetic patients who added 1 cup of cooked legumes, including lentils, to their daily diet for 3 months. The intervention group saw A1C reductions of 0.5% on average compared to control group. Their LDL cholesterol also decreased, and several cardiovascular risk markers improved. The researchers noted that legume consumption appeared to improve glycemic control through multiple mechanisms, including resistant starch, fiber, protein, and micronutrients like magnesium and chromium that support insulin function. Let me tell you about Dorothy, 68 years old, retired nurse from Pennsylvania. She knew better than most what poor diabetes control meant. She had seen the complications during her career: amputations, kidney failure requiring dialysis, blindness. She did not want that future. But her A1C kept climbing despite medications. First metformin, then they added glipizide. Then her doctor mentioned possibly starting insulin soon. Her A1C was 8.1. Her fasting glucose ran 150 to 170 most mornings. Dorothy started researching alternative approaches. She came across information about legumes and resistant starch. She began cooking large batches of lentils twice weekly. Green lentils, red lentils, sometimes black beluga lentils for variety. She would cool them in the refrigerator and use them throughout the week. Lentil soup. Lentil salad with vegetables and lemon vinaigrette. Lentils mixed with brown rice that had also been cooled and reheated. She ate approximately 1 cup of prepared lentils daily. After 3 months, her A1C was 7.3. After 6 months, 6.8. Her fasting glucose dropped into the 110 to 130 range. Her doctor was impressed, but slightly puzzled because Dorothy had not increased her exercise significantly and had not made dramatic caloric restrictions. She had simply added lentils prepared correctly and replaced some of her usual starches with cooled and reheated versions. Dorothy is now 71. Her most recent A1C was 6.5, right at the threshold where some doctors would not even diagnose diabetes. She still takes metformin, but the glipizide was discontinued. The insulin her doctor mentioned 3 years ago never became necessary. Dorothy attributes the change to resistant starch and the metabolic benefits of feeding her gut bacteria properly. Her doctor still does not fully understand the mechanism, but cannot argue with sustained improvement in objective biomarkers. This pattern repeats over and over. People discover information their doctors never mentioned. They implement simple food preparation changes. Their numbers improve measurably. And the medical establishment shrugs because there is no continuing education seminar sponsored by a pharmaceutical company teaching physicians about lentil preparation techniques. If this is making you angry, if you are realizing how much information exists that never reaches patients, I need you to share this video. Share it with every senior, managing blood sugar, your parents, friends from church, anyone over 60 taking diabetes medication who has never been told about resistant starch formation. The algorithm will not show them this content unless you send it directly. You have the power to change someone's health trajectory just by clicking share. Number 3 on the countdown. Sweet potatoes. Wait, do not close the video. I know sweet potatoes contain carbohydrates, but preparation method transforms their glycemic impact completely. Sweet potatoes contain a type of starch that when cooled forms resistant starch particularly effectively. They also contain fiber, potassium, and beta-carotene supporting overall metabolic health. A study published in Plant Foods for Human Nutrition examined the resistant starch content of various potato types after different preparation methods. Sweet potatoes that were baked, cooled at 4 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, then reheated contained nearly 4 times more resistant starch than freshly baked sweet potatoes. The cooling and reheating process converted rapidly digestible starch into resistant starch type 3 at remarkably high rates. Research from the Journal of Medicinal Food tested sweet potatoes specifically in diabetic patients. Participants consumed 100 grams of cooked, cooled, and reheated sweet potato daily for 8 weeks. The treatment group showed significant improvements in fasting blood glucose, postprandial glucose response, and insulin sensitivity compared to control group. The researchers measured something called HOMA-IR, a calculation estimating insulin resistance. The sweet potato group showed a 24% improvement in insulin sensitivity. The mechanism relates partly to resistant starch, but also to other compounds in sweet potatoes. They contain chlorogenic acid, a polyphenol that inhibits alpha-glucosidase. the enzyme that breaks down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. When you slow that enzymatic breakdown, glucose enters your bloodstream more gradually. Sweet potatoes also contain anthocyanins, particularly in purple varieties, that have been shown to improve pancreatic beta cell function. Here is the preparation protocol. Choose medium sweet potatoes, scrub them clean, pierce with a fork several times, and bake at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 to 60 minutes until tender. Let them cool completely, then refrigerate overnight. The next day, slice them and reheat in the oven or eat them cold. Some people enjoy cold sweet potato cubed in salads. Others prefer reheating slices as a side dish. The key is the cooling period, allowing crystalline-resistant starch formation. We are approaching the end of the countdown. Before I reveal number 1, the single most powerful food for resistant starch formation and blood sugar control, I need you to do something. If even one of these mechanisms was information your doctor never explained to you, if this is the first time anyone has told you about resistant starch and retrogradation chemistry, drop a comment right now saying, "I deserve the truth." Let me know this information mattered. Let the algorithm know people want science-based nutrition education, even if it does not benefit pharmaceutical profit margins. Number 1. The most powerful food on this list for blood sugar control through resistant starch formation. Beans. Specifically kidney beans, black beans, and navy beans. These legumes contain the highest resistant starch content of any commonly consumed food when prepared correctly. 1 cup of cooked kidney beans contains approximately 8 grams of resistant starch when eaten freshly cooked. When those beans are cooled overnight and eaten cold or reheated, resistant starch content can increase to 12 grams per cup. 12 grams of resistant starch in a single serving. To put that in perspective, most resistant starch supplementation studies showing significant glycemic benefits use 15 to 30 grams daily. You could achieve meaningful resistant starch intake from beans alone. The research on beans and blood sugar control is overwhelming. A meta-analysis published in Diabetologia reviewed 41 trials examining legume consumption in diabetic patients. The pooled analysis showed that regular bean consumption reduced fasting blood glucose by an average of 12 milligrams per deciliter and A1C by 0.48%. That A1C reduction is comparable to what some oral diabetes medications achieve. A study in the Archives of Internal Medicine followed type 2 diabetics who consumed 3/4 cup of cooked beans daily for 12 weeks. The bean group showed significant improvements not just in blood sugar, but in blood pressure, LDL cholesterol, and C-reactive protein, a marker of systemic inflammation. The researchers noted that beans appeared to provide cardiovascular benefits beyond glucose control, addressing the primary cause of death in diabetic patients. The mechanism behind beans' remarkable benefits involves multiple pathways working simultaneously. First, resistant starch fermentation producing butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity and reduce hepatic glucose production. Second, high-soluble fiber content creating viscous gel-slowing glucose absorption. Third, protein content stimulating incretin hormones that enhance insulin secretion. Fourth, alpha amylase inhibitors naturally present in beans that slow starch digestion, similar to pharmaceutical acarbose. Fifth, polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, contributing to insulin resistance. When you cook beans, cool them overnight, and consume them the next day, you optimize all these mechanisms. The cooling increases resistant starch content. The fiber remains intact. The protein is bioavailable. The polyphenols are preserved. You create a complete glycemic control package in a food that costs pennies per serving. Let me tell you about Eleanor. 70 years old, retired teacher from North Carolina. Type 2 diabetic for 19 years. She had progressed through multiple medications. Metformin, glipizide, pioglitazone, sitagliptin. Her A1C kept creeping upward despite medication escalation. When it hit 8.6, her endocrinologist recommended starting insulin. Eleanor was terrified. She had watched her mother struggle with insulin injections for years before dying from diabetic complications. She felt like she was following the same path. Eleanor is now 73. Her current A1C is 6.8. She takes only metformin and glipizide, half the medications she was on 3 years ago. The insulin her doctor recommended never became necessary. Her kidney function, which had been declining, has stabilized. Her cardiovascular risk scores have improved. She attributes everything to beans prepared correctly and consumed consistently. Eleanor's endocrinologist still does not fully understand why her diabetes improved so dramatically. The doctor attributes it to weight loss, though Eleanor only lost 11 pounds over 3 years. The reality is, Eleanor changed her gut microbiome. She fed beneficial bacteria-resistant starch daily. Those bacteria produced compounds that gradually repaired her insulin sensitivity. The medical establishment does not teach physicians about microbiome intervention because there is no pharmaceutical to prescribe. So, doctors remain puzzled when patients improve through dietary changes that should not work according to conventional nutrition advice. Here's your action protocol. 7 steps you can implement starting today. Step 1. Choose your resistant starch sources. Start with 1 or 2 foods from this list: beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, lentils, oats, rice, or pasta. Step 2. Cook a large batch. Sunday evening is ideal for meal preparation. Step 3. Cool completely to room temperature, then refrigerate for minimum 12 hours, ideally 24 hours. Step 4. Consume over the following 3 to 4 days, either cold or reheated. Step 5. Monitor your blood sugar response if you have a glucometer. Test before eating and 2 hours after to see the impact on your individual glucose response. Step 6. Be consistent. This is not a one-time intervention. The benefits compound over weeks and months as your gut microbiome shifts and insulin sensitivity improves. Step 7. Do not stop your medications without medical supervision. Talk to your doctor about your improved numbers and ask about medication adjustment if appropriate. This is not going to transform your A1C overnight. The clinical trials showing meaningful improvement followed participants for 8 to 16 weeks minimum. That is not a miracle. That is your body slowly rebuilding insulin sensitivity and metabolic health through consistent delivery of resistant starch-feeding beneficial gut bacteria. Expect gradual improvement. Measure it. Document it. Share it with your physician even if they seem skeptical. Now I need you to help others find this information. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Turn on notifications so you see every video. Drop a comment saying I deserve the truth if this information mattered to you. Smash that like button to signal the algorithm that people want evidence-based nutrition science. And share this video. Send it directly to anyone you know managing blood sugar. Your spouse, your friends, someone from your community who is struggling with diabetes and has never been told about resistant starch formation. But we are not done. This video covered what to eat and how to prepare it. I made another video about the 7 vegetables that spike blood sugar worse than candy. Number 1 on that list, you probably ate it this week, thinking it was healthy. Number 3 is recommended by diabetes educators constantly despite raising glucose faster than a donut. Watch that video next. The link is on screen and in the description. They have controlled the narrative for 40 years. Your engagement, your subscription, your comments and shares, that is you taking control back. That is you saying we deserve complete information, not just what generates pharmaceutical profit. Join thousands of other seniors who are done being kept in the dark. Subscribe now, and I will see you in the next video where we expose the vegetables destroying your blood sugar control while your doctor tells you to eat more of them.